Worthley Sun reporter Damon Steer, and I'm joined with Sheriff candidate Justin Worthley of Wakefield. He is running in the Republican primary against incumbent Sheriff Dominic Ricciardi on September 8th, and welcome, Justin.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I guess we'll just start off with your background. What's your professional background? How long have you lived in Carroll County, and why did you choose to live here of all places?
So my professional background that would qualify me for this office is I did serve in New Hampshire law enforcement for a decade. I've since retired. I'm now a small business owner. I have an automotive repair facility. That was actually my career prior to law enforcement. And I've lived in Carroll County for a little over 5 years now. I moved up here because I always hiked up here, vacationed up here and stuff like that. I grew up in Rochester, and I prefer the scenery and the kind of the lower speed of life up here, which is part of why I'm running for this, because it's a great place to live. I'm kind of biased, but I think it's one of the best places to live, and I want to try and keep it that way.
And so tell me a little bit about your law enforcement career, where you served and how long in each.
So I started my career where I grew up in Rochester, and I did a little over 7 years there. And then I worked in a smaller town in Pittsfield, New Hampshire, to total just over 10 years. And in that 10 years, I did a lot of stuff. My biggest thing that I brought, and I kind of bring it to every day anyways, is bringing your best, being your best, and taking that seriously. Now I work on people's vehicles now, a little less important of a job in some senses, but I think if you bring that attitude, you train properly, obviously having people to train you and working along really quality people, which I was fortunate to do, that kind of enforces that culture or reinforces it. And I was very fortunate to work along those people, and it was an absolutely awesome career. I'm looking to jump back into it again.
Awesome. And so why are you running for sheriff? Like, why not be a police officer somewhere or a police chief or...
Well, I had many roles in my career. Largely, actually, is the retirement system. So that was the reason that I retired. Is I knew when I got into this that the retirement system didn't really fit my life goals, but I really wanted the opportunity. So I said to myself, I'll do this for 10 years. I'll reevaluate where I'm at in my life, see what I want to do. I got to that 10-year mark. I did the math out for the rest of my life, and I figured that I'd be able to, invest in myself and invest myself, my own money, in a better way that would yield more for myself and my family. So there was a need for, tradespeople all over the place, and I was actually able to get a substantial raise, retiring, investing into my now home that I own, and eventually start my own business. So being a full-time police officer, I loved it. I really did. Not every day, obviously, but it really came down to the fact that you're in a mandatory retirement system. In this role, I'm not bound to that, so it allows me to kind of have best of both worlds, and I also want to perpetuate that culture I was talking about where, keep the highest standard, training to the highest standard, and really help that to help the newer generations of law enforcement, because during my career and since I've retired, I've seen that the hiring standards aren't necessarily lower, but the training standards, recruitment's very low, and there's many factors in that. But I believe that if we actually do the same thing I just mentioned, where you be the best person, have the best attitude, and try and put the best product forward, that's going to yield us a better result for everybody. That's the community, that's our law enforcement professionals, and everyone in between.
And so how do you, it's always tough to get law enforcement officers, deputies, and police officers. Like, how would you recruit them?
I can't just go change the retirement system. That's a big thing that I would basically put out education on and try to advocate for some of those changes. But I think that, and I know from my personal experience, that if you know who you're working with are on your level, you know who you're working for, have your back, that allows you to do this job. It's a very difficult job. It's a very thankless job at times. Oftentimes it's not going to pay incredibly well. So the people that are getting into this are doing so because they have a calling or they're driven to serve their communities. and we just need to support them by giving them the best training they can have, the best equipment they can have, and that support that they need. And that varies depending on what you're talking about. One of the biggest things that I would focus on is critical incident support. So I've been through a lot of critical incidents. I've run some of them, all of which thankfully have been successful, and that's a big part of training and personnel, maybe a little bit of luck. And having that after incident support is very important, because that's what keeps you going. I mean, oftentimes I didn't make a lot of money in my career. I wasn't doing it for money. I did love the job, and I really loved what I did. And every time that I would have one of those low points where I'm like shaking my head, why am I doing this? I don't get paid, my hours are terrible. You'd have that little refresher moment where you'd do something where you can see the impact of what you're doing every day, and that would kind of mentally refresh you. And having people that have your back, the administration you work for, the people you work amongst, it makes all the difference. You know, it's the team mentality. If everyone's pulling the same direction, we all know what the mission is, and we all have the same approach to make sure that we're taken care of physically, mentally, and everything in between. That allows people to do this job and have a quality life at your own, with your own family, at your own home.
In general, primaries can be a little bit difficult for a reporter to cover, because if you have two people running the same party, generally, not every time, but you know, their platforms are similar, their ideology is similar, and so can you kind of point out how you would run things a bit different than Dominic Ricciardi?
Well, Dominic has done a good job. I mean, I think he's been the sheriff for a decade now. But one of my biggest things that I saw in my career, and I've worked for some really, like I said, inspirational people, is that at a certain point, you're kind of just going through the motions. And I'm not accusing him of that, but I don't see real leadership in the office. Now, the office has gained a lot of talent that excites me. I think one of the biggest things that would set me apart is my general attitude in leading from the front in that way, where, like I said, every day, and even my normal life when I'm dealing with customers or handling an issue, you know, you put the work in, you want to be the best, which means you're not settling for things. There was actually a comment that Sheriff Ricciardi made that really spoke to that. In regard to this ICE 287G agreement. I know that can be a polarizing thing. I'm going to probably get into that a little bit more during this interview. Where essentially, and you can look it up, he did, it is in the county commission minutes, where he essentially is saying that he didn't sign it, he's not against it, but in his opinion, it's not necessary. There are other agencies for that. And I think that when you carry that philosophy in any job, especially one that is as important as law enforcement is, that's just not the right attitude. I do believe that that is short-sighted, where if there's an opportunity for you to get better training, better resources, and really, sharpen your skills as an agency, you should be taking advantage of that and having this, we're good enough, or it's okay, or there's someone else for the job. I just fundamentally disagree with that. I know that during my career, I did a lot more work than a lot of other people because of that, and that burns you out as well. But when you have the attitude of, I want to be the one to do this so I know it's done right, and everybody on the team is doing that, you have the best product, and it's something that everyone can be proud of, you can be proud of it, the community can be proud of it, excuse me. And I've seen that work. If you're doing the right thing and you're consistent and you're honest, you will have support from those among you, those working above you, in the community, because I've seen it in action, so I know it can be effective.
The 287G thing, just for people who don't know, that's allowing local law enforcement to get training and support from ICE, essentially?
Yeah, so essentially the agreement is to work in cooperation with ICE, and once again, I know that's a somewhat polarizing topic. I'm going to explain it a little bit to kind of take that fear element out of it. Now, I'm not for any government entity just relying solely on federal funding, but if the money is already allocated for it, I think that especially a sheriff's office that is tasked with transporting prisoners routinely, it could be a short-term benefit to help with some personnel needs, help with equipment needs, help with training needs, at least in the short term. Now, my longer-term plan is to continue that without raising taxes, and there's obviously it's multifaceted. But I think that for the people who are against ICE because of their opinions, if they think that they're operating unlawfully and things like that, your local law enforcement being involved in that is a check and balance. Now, policing is the community. It means that everyone in the community is part of that mission. And any federal agency or any outside agency doesn't have that connection to the community. That can be intelligence, that can be relationships, all of which can be used for things to de-escalate stuff. So my main focus for wanting to sign this agreement, and where I think that Sheriff Ricciardi is short-sighted on it, is that we can use it for good and also dispel some of those concerns where if you do think that ICE just rolls into town and they're apprehending people unlawfully and whatnot, I would prevent those things from happening. I would never let another agency of any kind illegally arrest, detain, or otherwise any people that are supposed to be in our community. And that's how you do things safely. I can tell you for doing multi-jurisdictional operations before with SWAT teams and other agencies, when you don't have that connection, that is what creates the unsafe environment. You don't have proper intelligence. You don't have usually the proper homework going up to it. The on-scene, operation itself is a lot more volatile because things can get a little out of control more easily, especially if something's already happening. We'll use an example. Say ICE comes into a town, they do something, it escalates, and then now those local agencies are then responding to that. That is not the best way to do that.
No.
Being integral to those operations to either prevent the escalation entirely or have real-time information to make sure that things are done lawfully, make sure that we're de-escalating things where they should be, and making sure that we're doing the public safety piece if they cannot be escalated. That is paramount. So I think it's no matter where you land on the political spectrum on this issue, I think it's something we should support because that's how we have the best product. Now, the best product doesn't mean we arrest the most people, we ticket the most people. It means that the public, when a law enforcement professional shows up, they know they're going to be competent, they know they're going to be ethical, and they're going to be, actually have that humanity and understand what living around here is like. Once again, I've seen and done that in my decade. I've earned the trust and respect of everyone I was around. Doesn't mean they liked everything I did all the time, but I always had that respect because anyone I dealt with could trust that I would do the right thing, I'd be honest with them, and we would work through it where we could. So I know it works. I mean, you need to implement it, and you also have to have the attitude to want to do that, and I think we don't have that now.
I think the fear, just generally with ICE, and I see it in some of the protests I've covered and, walked through, is that people feel like ICE is going to come along and just start, if someone decides they're going to protest or someone's, just kind of milling around, they're going to get shot or hurt, or sometimes you see people filming law enforcement doing their job, and the ICE guy comes along with his mask and he says, "Get out of here." Do you have any thoughts on the masks and whether or not you can kind of keep them from sort of running roughshod over the community?
Yeah, and that's a legitimate concern, and we all see what's on the news and stuff like that, and obviously some of that's sensationalized. I don't like the mask thing. I understand the element where some of these agents don't want to be doxxed, they don't want to be targeted. So there is some legitimacy to that. But in what I've looked at, analyzing some of these other incidents that have gone south that we actually have video of, is it's outlining what I just said, where you have another agency coming in and doing something. You then have, a crowd that's obviously emotional about it, whether they're informed or not, that doesn't really matter in that moment. And the lack of control of the scenario is what allows those things to get out of control. So I'm going to use that, I think it was the Minnesota incident. That whole situation where that woman was able to drive into that operation or that traffic stop, fundamental day 1 or 2 stuff with law enforcement, if you set up a perimeter for something, people do not break that perimeter. The reason the perimeter is there is so you can keep the outside safe, control the environment on the inside, and kind of slow that time down so you can make better decisions. Because once it starts spiraling out of control, that's when we see those things happen. And a loss of life, no matter what the circumstances are, is tragic. The role of law enforcement is to eliminate threats, keep the community safe. Sometimes that doesn't optically look good, but we are tasked with doing it properly. So you can't just let things get out of control because of politics or optics. Then something that probably should not have happened happens, and then say, well, things are out of control. Law enforcement has that difficult job of maintaining the control over sometimes uncontrollable situations. And I've done that as well. I've made arrests where people are emotional and there's, kind of not a large scale riot, but that's where you have the other law enforcement controlling the crowd. Everyone's on the same page. Everyone knows this is my role in this operation. I'm going to stick to that role. We communicate effectively, and then everyone should be going home. If you have that, we can do these things peacefully. Now, the politics of whether you think people should be here or not, that's a separate issue. But as far as doing the job, I don't want anybody to be afraid that there's going to be black vans rolling around and people just getting grabbed. That's not the best way to do this. And having local law enforcement be an integral part of it is important. I can tell you 100% that I would not even allow that, because your sheriff has more authority than any federal agency anyways. I'm willing to work with them, especially as part of this agreement, but if they're not doing things properly, they're not going to be a part of it. And if it gets to a point that it's not controllable, then it won't happen. I don't necessarily think that would be a thing. I don't think we've had a lot of issues in New Hampshire that some other states have had. And I would hold those federal law enforcement officers to the same standard as us, where you are going to operate within the Constitution, you are going to do this lawfully, and you're not just, sometimes there's finesse, sometimes there's brute force, and a lot of times you got to be in between. Knowing the difference separates the great from the good.
One thing I want to ask you about is, do you believe the sheriff's office should be 24/7 in terms of law enforcement?
I do. That is a more difficult thing to achieve, but that is one of my goals. A lot of that's going to be through staffing. A lot of that's going to be multi-agency cooperation. I know that state police is already kind of helping. There's only a couple towns in Carroll County that are 24 hours. And a lot of these communities are bedroom communities. And the way that I would kind of approach that is, a lot of people are on call currently. It's not a super effective system, because realistically, if something is happening in that moment, if you have to wake someone out of bed, even if they're John Rambo, they're still going to wake up, have to get dressed, get in the car, and then get to whatever incident is. In my experience of critical incidents, it's going to be done by the time you get there. It is an expansive county. I would like to basically strategically have it where we can have 24-hour coverage and kind of spread people out, or especially sheriff's deputies. You're on call if you live in a certain part of the county or something like that. You would be responsible for a section of it and really work with the local agencies to achieve it. I don't know how that gets done right now, and honestly, it's not going to get done overnight, but that's something I think that we should strive for, because you don't need law enforcement a majority of the time in a lot of these communities, which is a good thing. But when you do need them, you need them. Right. And I think that we should provide that.
Yeah, it would be hard to do without kind of blowing up the budget, because you'd have to have, I don't know, twice as many deputies or many more.
That's true. And that's, I think, where this agreement, there's a lot of funding mechanisms in it for that. Maybe it's overtime. Maybe it's, boosted on-call pay to incentivize it. Maybe it's hiring some other people. And I can't overstate that that I'm a low-tax person. I don't believe in just expanding the budget to a point that's unsustainable. If we can use some of this funding for a short-term goal and then use that time to figure out the long-term solution, that's what I'm about. I'm about sensible solutions, practical solutions, and ones that work for everybody, that are efficient and they're effective.
And we actually, I got a little bit ahead of myself. We should go over what the sheriff does. Basically, you provide law enforcement to towns that might not have any coverage and support the towns that do. You do prisoner transports, from the jail to the court, and then you do civil service, which is like serving lawsuits and things like that.
Yes.
Are there any other roles? Court security?
Yeah, so Carroll County is a little more unique than most counties in New Hampshire, where there's patrol, there's civil service, warrant services, which I don't know the frequency of those, court security, like you mentioned, and prisoner transports. Now, usually you kind of have dedicated personnel to that. I don't know the exact ins and outs of that situation, but I do know that we definitely can expand upon it. It makes it more difficult where there's patrol capacity, because that's a lot more work, essentially. And I think that expanding the office and getting the coverage, that's where we were just talking about using local agencies and working with them to say, hey, if we have, I'll use an example, if you have 10 people in a certain area, do we need 8 of them during the day and 2 people till midnight? Or do we maybe need 5 people or 4 people during the day and stagger evening shifts? Now, I can tell you, as someone who has worked a lot of evening shifts, nobody wants to do it, okay? I get that, but that's not what this job is a lot of times. And one of the fundamental things that will set me apart from Sheriff Ricciardi is that, I've said this the past couple times I've met with you, I want to work. So I want to do this job to work. The first benefit you will get is electing me to the sheriff position is that you have an extra patrol person. You have an extra transport person. I don't want to work nights and weekends either. I will do so as necessary, because that's what's needed. And also to help show the people, I have never been the guy that just says, do as I say, not as I do. I believe in leading by action. So if that means I got to pick up an overtime shift on midnights, as much as I don't want to do that, especially being the agency head, I think you should do that. I do know that's not happening currently, and I think that's kind of goes back to that mindset thing where if you really believe in this idea of doing it well, you have to demonstrate it, and I think that's something we're lacking currently.
One thing, the sheriff's office has had sort of different specialties over the years. I think, do they have a dog now?
They have 2, actually. They just
dogs.
absorbed the Effingham chief, and I believe his canine as well.
So, you have that aspect too. And then, like, a long time ago, I think when I first started, they had a guy who was really good at forensics and did, like, computer crime, specifically, like, child predators and that kind of thing. So there are different things that you could do. Do you have any, like, ideas for, like, expanded law enforcement? Like, someone today said, well, what about corruption in the towns? Like, will he help with that? There's all these different law enforcement. There's, like, white collar, there's, I don't know, governmental corruption, there's child predators, there's internet crimes, there's identity theft. There's a lot of different.
Yeah. It's an awesome point. My opinion is that crime does not know a socioeconomic category. I'm not going to ride into towns and do this walking tall type thing where I'm going to be taking on different towns. But if someone can provide a legitimate complaint, especially if it can be substantiated and can achieve a grand jury indictment or something like that, I will investigate it. I don't want to go to war with towns. I do think there is a lot of issues. There's been a lot of people who have reached out to me expressing them. I've had tons of people throughout my life and my law enforcement career who claim they have a grievance, but they can't substantiate it.
Right.
If there's something legitimate, we will investigate it. Part of this funding is to expand the thing. So a big focal point for me is that I think that the sheriff's office should be the standard. That means we have the best technology, we have the best personnel, we have the best equipment, and we have the best training so we can do those things. sex crimes, they're terrible. No one wants to investigate them. They're horrible. It's probably some of the most emotional stuff that you'll deal with, but it's necessary. We definitely need to be doing that. We can't be relying on state police for everything. One of the most recent things on this topic is recently, a Madison Town employee was indicted on theft. Now, if you're indicted, it usually leads to the sense that there's something there if a jury of your peers have already indicted you for it, which for those who don't know, an indictment is essentially having a jury create the arrest warrant instead of just a judge signing off on it. Typically speaking, for felony level crimes, that's what you use because it strengthens the case.
And still innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, absolutely.
By
Absolutely.
A full jury.
You are always innocent until convicted by a jury of your peers. But that's one of those things that I personally think the sheriff's office should have been involved in. Now, maybe there is a conflict with it. Maybe there's a legitimate conflict where the sheriff's office should not have been involved. But I don't know if that exists. And if it does exist, I haven't seen any kind of press release from the sheriff's office explaining that. And I think that that would be an important piece of it. It goes back to that, if someone else is going to investigate it, let's let them do it. Would I love to work with state police? Yes, I would. But state police is just as burdened as everybody else. We can't be looking to someone else to do the job. We need to be looking inward and seeing what can we do to be the most effective people that we can be, to do the best job that we can do and get that result for the public. And it doesn't matter who's committing the crimes. We need to be the ones to solve them, prevent them where we can, intervene in the critical things as peacefully as possible, but we need to be solving crime, because I can tell you wholeheartedly that people usually will not commit crimes, most people, if they don't think they can get away with it. And you can limit a lot of crime by prevention.
And we got about 3 minutes left. Is there something that you want to talk about or get the word out on that I haven't asked you?
Really, I think we've actually covered everything, so I appreciate your questions. For you folks, I really need you to go out on September 8th. Dominic Ricciardi and I are the only ones on the ballot. I would really appreciate your support. I do have a Facebook. I make videos pretty frequently. I put them out. They're very low budget, but they are genuine. They are not scripted. And I would really appreciate your support so we can kind of create the culture that I'm talking about here. And unless you have anything else for me, I think we're good.
I guess if you become sheriff, are you going to keep the social media updates?
Yeah, I think that's the community policing piece of this is transparency. I probably will be a little fancier than standing in my field with a cell phone, but I'll do so with press conferences, monthly meetings. I might vary those just so it's easier for people to get to, but that is part of the community policing part, is being transparent, communicating and engaging with the public, because a good police department, or the best police department, you're part of it no matter where you live, because you can't be everywhere.
I should ask, how are you going to juggle the auto mechanic shop and the sheriff's job?
Thankfully, I have met a lot of people along my life. One of my friends has his own shop. We actually were talking about it the other night, and he said that if I win, he'll kind of backfill and help me, because I know on its face it doesn't make sense for me to do this, but I do believe in it. My wife thinks I'm crazy too, but I believe in doing this. That's why I'm still here, and I think that we can achieve it. So I know that if I do the right thing and put my nose to the grindstone, it'll work out in the end. I just probably have to work more.
All right. Well, I guess have at it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for being here.
Appreciate you.
Thanks.